rock gate. Didn't have to be a lot of things. It seemingly that Samson had strength and might and power over. But he let someone who was much weaker than he was. See, we can be strong in the Lord, but a lot of times it's things that could hurt us, harm us, or pull us away from God. So Satan does not always use big things. He can use small things, and we find through life. I've often thought, how come you would think Samson could see, but sometimes people get blinded. Samson got blinded later on physically. With Philistines, they put out his eyes. Why did they put out his eyes? Sister Brenda Rush, why do you think he put his eyes out? It don't matter how strong you are. Don't matter who you are. If you don't have sight, what good are you? You could be the strongest man in the world. You could be say, if he was a boxer, the greatest boxer in the world. If he got blinded, it don't matter how strong he was, or who he was, or his past. Said that they blinded him, and they knew that if he blinded him, they had him, because what good was his strength? So we find that was in the Philistines. They were not nice people. They were cruel. We find that, don't they? They were cruel. But we know God had Samson for that purpose, and he showed himself strong many times, how he went out and how he fought in a lot of great victories by the Spirit of God. Samson watched over his generation, judging the people, even as did God. So the story of Samson has many lessons that can be expounded upon. As with other characters in the Old Testament times, God had a purpose for them and imparted the particular gifts upon them to fulfill his purpose. I think Romans 11 and 33, and again, I didn't bring my Bible up here, but we will make mention of that. I believe it says, for who has known the mind of the Lord, in part of that verse, his ways are past finding out. I believe that's the scripture. If that's not it, somebody can correct me, but the thought is his ways are past finding out, and how God works in many ways to fulfill his will. So we want to be able, in some small way, for God's Spirit to work through us, to fulfill his will. It might not be for a whole nation. It might not be for a whole big group of people. But what is it just as for an individual? Is God, is God a God of just real big things? We know he is. Is God interested in the whole nation of America? Yes, is God interested in the welfare of the world? Yes, he is. But is God interested in the man sitting on the street, that nobody wants to help, or everybody shuns? Is God a God that desires to help him? Maybe that's where he would lead us, or me, or you to. We may not do, as in some people's thoughts, some great thing, but God cares for all people, and he cared for his people here, and he was making a way through Samson and through his Spirit. God will make a way. We find that Israel, as Judges 13:1 says, did evil again, and yet God, in his long-suffering, and remembering his promise, once again offered help and hope to the children of Israel. Somebody said about there being hope. There's always hope. That's the way we look at it. Because we don't know. I can't judge. It may look that there's no hope, but I don't know. It can look, somebody can curse God, and they can do all kind of things and say that they, don't want God or whatever. But yet, God knows. There's still, who knows? The word says there's hope of a tree if it be cut down. It said yet through the scent of water and all this can happen. Said it may sprout up again. So we find that there's always hope. And God made a way to offer help and the hope to the children of Israel, and they wanted to use Samson. perhaps if Samson would have thought about that more, maybe his conduct would have been different. Maybe he would have been more careful, because God gives us his spirit. He gives us the good things, the good life we have, and sometimes people don't think about that. They get blinded by the pleasures of the world, the things of the world, and things pull them away from their dedication and their work to God. And that can be in our day and time. There's a lot of things. I was talking about to somebody the other day, and we say it, and sometimes we don't really, may not look like we want to be more careful in that way, because there's so many things in this world that could cause us to lose sight of what God would have us to do. But it says, here God made a way through a miraculous work as he had before and afterwards to cause, as we already said, to cause the barren to bring forth. And so God is always able to make a way. And I may be repeating myself a little bit, this is what I wrote down. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. So have mercy upon the Sunday school teacher, upon the preacher, whoever, because we're human. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, so that's the way it is. But I said, in my childhood days, I remember the story of Samson. And we asked about my mother about Samson in the end, as I said. It shows, yes, his strength and might, as long as he was faithful to his calling. Remember the Philistines he slew, the lion he slew, the gates he uprooted and carried to the top of the hill. And knowing this lesson, it is his strength by the Spirit that empowered him, which we speak. He was to be a Nazarite from the womb. And so as I was looking at that, we talk about the vow of the Nazarite and how people, as we said, that were Nazarites, but Samson was to be a Nazarite from his mother's womb his whole life. Sister Wingate.
Brother Larry, I think you said that children asked, did he go to heaven? I think a lot of adults has wondered the same thing.
Right.
That did he make it to heaven because of the circumstances
Right.
of everything that happened to him?
Right. So that, I think about that in the end, that he did pray to God, and maybe probably in his mind, that was it for him. One thing, he was blinded. He was blinded, and what use was he, to himself, or maybe he was. That was his thought. I don't know. That's something, we'll never know. I wouldn't say we'll never know, but we can speculate, think upon. But I think about his strength and about the things he done, and in the end, it says, how he did. The enemies of God, he destroyed more at that time than any time in his life. So we find that the particular thing was that God wanted him. It wasn't just something for a season or a time. His was a special calling. The Nazarite vow was a lifelong vow. I believe Brother Sanford mentioned that a good while back. It was, you can make a vow, the Nazarite vow, for a particular time, and it had the different things you were to do or not to do and make that vow. And there was a person that was to consecrate themselves to God for a particular purpose and for maybe a particular time. And you observed, if you made that vow, you were, in the sight of God, you were to do those things or not do those things. But it was very clear in the scriptures. It told his mother that he was to be a Nazarite from the womb until the day of his death. So that was his vow, the will of God upon Samson. It wasn't just for a particular time, it was his whole life. To Samson, that should have been something real important, maybe more important than what he realized. His mother was to take that vow of the Nazarite for a particular time. While she was carrying Samson, God said for her not to drink strong drink, to abstain from this, that, or the other. And that was how important it was to God to see, that this was done according to his will. Even his mother, she was a Nazarite for a particular time there because she was to be consecrated and separated to the things of God. So we learn a lot of that, even, we don't take, a vow with the Nazarite, but yet, we are separated unto God. We are consecrated, and that should mean a lot, that we want the will of God or God to work through us, whatever way it is, through his Spirit. So how, as long as he obeyed, and Lot, as long as his strength remained, we find that he had those vows, and he observed them things, that he had the power of God upon him. And one thing in particular was that he was not to cut his hair. And that's how the enemy, how Delilah was it, she came. You know anybody named Delilah? I don't know anybody named Delilah. I remember Tom Jones used to sing a song about Delilah, or something, Delilah. But it was because it was what? A bad thing, not a good thing. Nobody would want to name their daughter Delilah, or maybe even animal, because the devil worked through her, and she weakened him down a little bit at a time, for all kind of sympathy and all kind of things. She worked finally, in just desperation, and because of her worrying him, he told her where his strength lay. And of course she had people lying in wait, to do that. And when she cut his hair and, various things. But probably the saddest part, one of the saddest scriptures, I think, in the Word of God is where it says Samson, when he rose up, it said, I will go forth as at other times, And it says that he didn't know that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. That's a sad thing, and it was very sad that he thought he would just come, he didn't realize in that particular moment. But it says that he became as other men. In other words, he didn't, he was still a man. He still probably had average strength and all this, but that power that God had bestowed upon him, that strength to overcome the enemy, he lost that, and how he became as another man. And they took him and, put out his eyes. So we find that, we would love the story to end different. Children do that sometimes, don't they? I remember, I think it was maybe Scotty or something, I'd tell them about Little Red Riding Hood and Old Wolf, and they say, oh, yeah, I said, no, he escaped. You tell it this way or tell it that way. They want to tell you, just do it a little bit different. Tell it different. Don't let them, the wolf, just make it a little bit different. But, we would love the story to end different. But, it's God allows those things to show us and warn us, how we know it could have been different, that's how it is in our life. We want our life. I think about a song, maybe in the evening light, it says, when my life's work is ended and the summons has come. So when we want our life to end, we want it to be that we have kept ourselves separated, as it were, to the things of God. Okay? So the Lord blessed Samson from the beginning, blessed him, no doubt, in his youth. And we don't be discouraged about that. We can think about the things that he did and God's blessings upon and his people that he was able to work for. Appreciate the saints of God. Y'all keep us in prayer.